a lot of people think that maybe scrapes aren't productive for actually hunting over the scrape. And we mentioned that one reason for that is maybe they're focused on the wrong scrapes. What are some other factors that go into actually hunting the scrape that makes it productive for you?
Yep. Number one, and maybe this is something you guys might have just hit me on the right day, but this is something that, I've been doing, I probably haven't talked a lot about, but I think calling around scrapes is phenomenal. Keep in mind that I think a buck, especially a mature buck, wants to catch a less dominant buck at that scrape, given the right time of year. And I think that, how do I want to word this? That if he hears another buck at that location, it might not even been on his mind that he was going to go visit that scrape. Maybe he's 200-300 yards out and the conditions were right and he was able to hear your grunting from that far away. Him thinking that that's at that scrape is going to increase the odds of scrape hunting way more than just hoping for something to come in and check it out. Like, I think calling around scrapes, if you're going to call anywhere, if you're the type of hunter that, you have a lot of success calling, you're good at it, I would focus around areas where there's more sign, more scrapes, but places still where a buck is going to feel secure, because you could have a scrape tree out in the middle of a food plot and you could have a ground blind or whatever set up right there, and you could call all you want. That deer is not going to come in and check that out, or just the visual standpoint. But in the right situation, if a buck has to come in physically to check that scrape out and just to check out your calling, that's going to entice him way more. That's at least one of the biggest tricks I have.
I love calling. Love calling.
Yep.
Have success with it in and around areas you're talking about.
Yep.
Are you talking more so in the aspects of grunting around scrapes, or are you talking rattling? What exactly are you talking about when it comes to calling?
For me, and I'm not knocking rattling or bleeding, and maybe I'm just more of a simplistic type guy. Like, I'll be honest with you, I don't pack every gadget in my pack. I throw a grunt call, I'll throw a sandwich, a bottle of water, my knife, and my hunting license, and that's all I need. Everyone's a little bit different, but the amount of success I've had grunting is just unbelievable. And like, it's just amazing, especially in the big woods where you don't have high densities of deer, or it's harder to narrow things down. But being able to reach out there and intercept deer that were never going to pass by you, because the woods are just so big and there's so many travel routes and so many different reasons where they can get around you, calling increases your odds many, many times. And honestly, I've had success from it almost just out of boredom. Like, just because I hunt big woods where it's not uncommon to go a few days sitting all day and not see a deer. So you start to get desperate. You're thinking, what the heck, I might as well grunt or might as well rattle, whatever. And for me, it's been grunting. But I started to realize that, holy cow, like, the more I grunt, the more success I have. And it's actually gotten to the point where some people think I'm crazy, but I don't ever go 5 to 10 minutes without grunting. I grunt constantly. I grunt as loud as I can. I mean, I make it sound normal, and I grunt in all directions. And it's the amount of encounters, like last year, like when I guided, because I didn't have any time to hunt during the best part of the rut because I was guiding archery hunters. But it was around the 10th when I got freed up. And like, most of my hunters, I mean, they were maybe seeing a buck a day or every other day have an encounter. I think that week I hunted, I think I saw like 28 bucks. And I'd say 23, 24 of them were due to grunting. Like, that's what created those encounters. Yeah, I had good setups. I did scouting. I had intel, but like, there was still a lot of area for those deer to be in, and that's what really led to those encounters.
Oh, I love this conversation. Because listen, I'm grunting full, dude. Like, last 4 or 5 years, I've changed that and have grown a lot more and had way more success. And I always say calling is making your own luck.
Yep.
If you're put the homework in and you're in the right spot, I feel like that's the one thing that can really turn the tides a little bit for you. As long as you have a realistic grunt call, you know how to use it correctly. It makes it sound realistic, and it's in a spot that a buck's going to want to naturally come to. It's like grunting in a food plot or grunting in some wide open timber, probably not the best circumstance.
Yes.
But if you're in around that bedding cover and it's visually a little more obstructed,
Yep.
I feel like that curiosity really can help. So I'm glad you brought that up and implementing that around hunting scrapes where a buck's already going to want to come investigate.
Yeah, many times running cameras on scrapes, or especially in video mode, some of the best fights that my cameras ever captured, and even grunting and calling, you name it, were around scrapes. Like, that's a social area. That is a very common place where bucks are going to meet up with each other, and that's literally the spot where they're competing over territory or does. That's where a fight's going to take place.
Now, also, one thing I think that needs to play a big factor, talking about calling and hunting around scrapes, how do you like to position the tree that you're going to get in to give you the best opportunity to not only shoot a buck coming to that scrape, but also potentially comes downwind checking that scrape from you calling or just investigating? How do you typically like to set up around a scrape?
Yeah, and that is the biggest challenge of scrape hunting, is your setup, because not only when calling, but all times most bucks eventually will come in downwind of that scrape. He may not have been coming in from a half mile away downwind the whole time, but once he starts to get a little bit closer to it, he'll start hooking downwind, and that is extremely difficult. But where I think you have a little bit of an advantage in the mountains is if you can use the elevation right. And a lot of times, like, if say you're hunting on the narrow part of a ridge, and just the way your setup can be in certain spots, as long as it's not a big flat, usually in most higher elevations in ridge country, you can set up to where most of your scent is probably blowing over that deer coming in. Now, if it's a big flat, or you're down in a bottom, or you're on a bench, it's way harder. There really is nothing you can do. Not say you shouldn't hunt scrapes in those locations, but my best success has been when I found a scrape and hunted a scrape where I had a wind advantage, or maybe there's some obstacle that that there's almost no way a buck can totally come in downwind. But the ultimate way of having success is finding a wind advantage. You can't defeat that deer's nose hunting a scrape.
To me, that's the advantage, though, of hunting scrapes in mountains versus flat land.
Exactly.
Because in flat land, unless you have something, like you said, big down trees, some kind of water that they're absolutely more than likely not crossing,
Yep.
there's nothing keeping from that deer coming from downwind, and there's no height advantage, really. Even though you might be 15, 20 foot per tree,
Yep.
at some point your scent molecules are hitting the ground.
Exactly.
And if you cross right there, you're busted versus you get some big elevation change, and you can get your scent blown off the steep side, and there's a little bench, there's a little flat spot that scrapes on, he's hooking around it, but he's not coming over that, not quite a bluff, but a really steep spot's really gnarly.
Yep.
You have a little bit more advantage following thermals and everything in that circumstance, correct?
Yep, and that's where, like, there's been times I've been almost afraid to call, because, like, I know if I call here, a buck is going to come in downwind, and I see no way that deer is going to not detect. I have nothing. But then there's been times, like I've said many times, where I just know I got an advantage here, and given the topography and the way my scent cone is going to blow out, I'm pretty confident in most directions he's not going to pick it up, or by the time he picks it up, it might be too late. But I still would say, like, maybe you hunt flat land, or maybe you don't have the topography similar to the mountains. I would rather gamble and just have the encounter. You just never know. What if the wind shifts? What if something happens? Or how can you not want to just see a big deer? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard. I would have a hard time not at least calling some, even if I had not much of an advantage. Once again, I know I touched on there's spots where I hardly call, but, like, I guess I'm saying I don't want to say I wouldn't call at all. And I just want to. I would want listeners to at least still give it a try if they didn't have the terrain and topography that I had, because just getting a buck within sight versus not seeing anything at all. You just never know what will happen.
Well, we've got, for listeners out there and viewers, about the same time that this episode come out, there's going to be another really good episode on calling coming out the same time frame.
Yeah.
So it's going to be great kind of hand-in-hand conversations here.
Great.
Whether that one came out before or after this episode, but within a couple weeks. Yeah, I love calling. And like what you're talking about, like calling 360 degrees, all that, make it try to sound realistic, where the call fades away from wherever the deer is and kind of gets a little bit louder.
Yep.
Also, when you're talking about setting up and hunting the actual scrape,
Yep.
I'm guessing you're trying to be able to shoot to the scrape.
Yes.
But what else are you taking consideration from a stand setup? I know, trees can be somewhat limited, as in the tree that gives you the best cover and the best situation, but what else are you taking consideration other than wind direction for accessing that tree and that location, but also shot placements?
I think another key factor is, say like, you might want to get, how do I explain this? So where I've run into a problem before is, if I set up, maybe downwind of the scrape, and I'm like directly almost in line with the scrape, many times a buck will just catch you in a tree. Like if it's right within line of the route he's taken, you want to be somewhat offset if you feel you can predict where a buck is going to come in. Because even if he doesn't pick up your scent, I still feel like for some odd reason, some bucks get a little bit vulnerable, like coming into one specific spot. Maybe it's because you got a camera there, they've smelled some human scent, but many times I'll see a buck kind of hesitate. It's not like they're just coming in running to that scrape. They'll take their time, he'll stop, he'll look around. You don't want to be in that visual path either. Like I try to be offset. I think you definitely want to be either up high or in good cover, and especially if you're calling. Because, ultimately, I don't want a buck to even sense that the sound came from 20 feet up a tree. But I still feel like sometimes, if he's not that far out, he might be a little bit hesitant too. If he heard you grunting, that didn't sound right. It's kind of sound near that scrape, and I'm going to check it out. So you always want to be off center, and I wouldn't be. I think you want to extend the shot further than what most hunters would like. Like I think 15 to 20 yards to a scrape is usually too close. I think if you're confident at 40 yards out, I think you're better off setting up 40 yards. That gives you a lot more room to play. Or a situation might be a buck didn't come in downwind until the last 20 yards. Then he does cut in, but it's too late. You got a shot. So I think too many hunters have set up too close to scrapes.
Do you ever find in some of those spots you try to hunt on a scrape where there's that faint trail downwind of the scrape, 15, 20, 30 yards?
Yep.
Do you put that into consideration for setups as well?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because I think we talked about it on the last podcast as far as trail camera setups. For sure, especially there's multiple bucks usually that are always going downwind of that certain scrape. And you will find sometimes not just a faint trail, but an active trail. For instance, you find a scrape, a pretty active scrape, maybe there's a trail going right through it, but then you look 20, 30 yards out from it and you see another trail paralleling. That's that trail that they're using to scent check that scrape from a distance. And that's probably the route they're going to take coming in. So instead of even maybe being 30 yards from that scrape, I'd be 30 yards from that trail. I would take that chance because I told you before that more bucks come in and check the scrape without ever standing in it than actually working it. They just come in downwind, give it a whiff, and they're gone. Like that's the situation you want to expect to happen more.
Man, I love this conversation so much. That's exactly what that buck that I was talking about earlier did. He came in and he was coming right towards the scrape and he got about 50 yards out and he just turned and he started swinging around it.
Yep.
And unfortunately for him, I had a rifle.
Yeah.
So it didn't work out for him.